Ground News is combating divisiveness in media. Ground is a news comparison platform that helps you see multiple perspectives for any news story so you can be more of a well-rounded news reader. Download the free app at ground.news/Pakman. We have two absolutely huge stories to start with today, and I wasn't sure which to start with, but let's just start with the first one. We have now learned that Apple has given the Trump, or gave at the time, the Trump administration information and documents on Democratic lawmakers. And this is yet another attempted or real abuse of subpoena power to obtain documents about the political enemies of the Trump administration. And we also, of course, have to consider the role which Apple itself has played. Let's take a look at an article from Thomson Reuters, which says Apple on Friday said it has tightened some of its rules for responding to legal requests after the U.S. Justice Department during Donald Trump's presidency subpoenaed it for information on Democratic lawmakers. Apple said it recently instituted a limit of 25 identifiers, such as email addresses or phone numbers, per legal request. So far what they're saying is, if you're going to do this, you'll have to make multiple requests. You can't give us a list of 100 identifiers. You'll have to give us four lists of 25. The Cupertino, California-based company said it received a subpoena from the Justice Department in February 2018 for information on 109 identifiers made up of 73 phone numbers and 36 email addresses, but that it did not release content such as emails and pictures to prosecutors. The New York Times on Thursday reported, and we will get to that report, that federal prosecutors subpoenaed Apple and other companies as part of an investigation searching for the sources behind media news reports about contacts between Trump's associates and Russia. This is a key line. What was the point of this? What was it that the Trump administration, the Trump Justice Department, was seeking to find out in requesting this information? They were trying to uncover the sources, the journalistic sources for reporting about Trump administration contacts with Russia. Think back to when this was going on. And there were reports about Jeff Sessions said there were no contacts, but look at all these contacts that we found. Donald Trump said there were no contacts, the whole list of these people. So the Trump administration, through the Justice Department, said, hey, you know what? Let's start figuring out. Let's get information from people's iPhones and from the iCloud, whatever else was being used, right? Related to Apple or possibly being used. Let's see if we can figure out who the sources are or were for what these reports are claiming. Trump publicly saying, oh, anonymous sources. No, they're just bogus. But privately, they knew they weren't bogus, so much so that they were trying to figure out exactly who they were. Publicly saying, when you read anonymous source, doesn't exist. There's no real source. Privately understanding there are sources and trying to figure out exactly who those people are. The investigation targeted at least two Democrats on the House of Representatives Intelligence Committee, aides, and family members, including one minor, the New York Times reported. Apple said it had no way to tell what the nature of the investigation was and released only basic account subscriber information such as names, addresses, email addresses, phone numbers, as well as connection logs and IP addresses. Apple said it did not provide data showing to whom or when messages of any kind were sent. The New York Times then reporting, the Justice Department subpoenaed Apple for information in February 2018 about an account that belonged to Donald F. McGahn II, President Donald J. Trump's White House counsel at the time. This is another wrinkle to this story. This is another aspect which we're still trying to figure out. For the most part, it seems what was going on here was an attempt to figure out who were the sources for the news media, presumably on the Democratic side, about these different contacts that the Trump campaign and administration had with Russians. But at the same time, the New York Times report points out that there was an attempt to get information about Donald Trump's lawyer as well. And the New York Times article says it was not clear what FBI agents were investigating, whether Mr. McGahn was their specific focus, or whether he was swept up in a larger net because he had communicated with someone who was under scrutiny. That's another important aspect to understand. There are some on the right saying this was not a partisan thing being done by Trump loyalists in the Justice Department looking for information only on Democrats, as evidenced by the fact that they were looking for information about Trump's own lawyer. What it may have been, and if it is, it's absolutely crazy, that there was some other person being scrutinized. Imagine that there was, just as a hypothetical, some Russian national that was sort of at the center of this. The Justice Department may have been saying, we need information on anybody who's been in touch with this person. And Apple may have seen a connection between McGahn and that individual. And so incidentally, McGahn may have been swept up on it. We just don't know at this point in time is the point. Now, meanwhile, as reported by CNN's Manu Raju, who tweeted over the weekend, quote, Barr, Sessions, and now Rosenstein say they were unaware of the subpoenas sent under their tenure for Democratic lawmakers' records. These are three people with a track record of dishonesty, first of all, so I wouldn't trust them much. But what seems to be going on here is that they are trying to get their stories straight for one-word answers if they're ever forced to testify. How? Nobody knew anything. All of these subpoenas were filed, but nobody knew who authorized them. Who signed? We just don't know. The administration was granted years-long gag orders against these subpoenas, same as the others. These were gag orders that were renewed multiple times. What judge okayed the renewal of the gag order on the fact that these subpoenas were signed off on and granted? Which judge or judges were involved? Do we need to subpoena the subpoenas to figure out who is behind some of this stuff? It is an incredible story. It did not make the headlines I might have guessed it would have made, or that I would have hoped it would make, but a major story which we are going to continue following. Another major story this weekend of huge geopolitical and foreign policy importance is that longtime Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of the Likud party is finally out as prime minister, replaced by the incoming Prime Minister, Naftali Bennett. In Israel, much of what takes place is coalition-based. And so what we have seen here is that by a single vote margin, Naftali Bennett is in and Benjamin Netanyahu is out because of the coalition that Bennett was able to form. The New York Times reports, the long and divisive reign of Benjamin Netanyahu, the dominant Israeli politician of the past generation, officially ended on Sunday, at least for the time being, as the country's parliament gave its vote of confidence to a precarious coalition government stitched together by widely disparate anti-Netanyahu forces. Israel's parliament, the Knesset, approved the new government by just a single vote, 60-59, with one abstention. After his supporters cheered the announcement of his election, Naftali Bennett then exchanged a brief handshake with Netanyahu before walking to the rostrum at the front of the parliamentary chamber and taking the oath of office as prime minister. Yair Lapid, a centrist leader, is set to take Mr. Bennett's place after 2 years if their government can hold together that long. They lead an 8-party alliance ranging from left to right, from secular to religious, that agrees on little but a desire to oust Netanyahu, the longest-serving leader in the country's history, and to end Israel's lengthy political gridlock. In a speech made before the confidence vote, Bennett hailed his unlikely coalition as an essential antidote to an intractable stalemate. We stopped the train before the abyss, Bennett said. The time has come for different leaders from all parts of the people to stop this madness. Now, you will remember that Netanyahu, as the article points out, and his right-wing allies from Likud and other far-right parties did everything they could. I mean, I guess maybe there was something else they could have done, something illegal. I don't know. They did almost everything they could. They applied pressure on other right-wing opposition lawmakers. They were trying to peel them away from possibly being on the Bennett side, but ultimately unable to do it. The question, of course, now is what happens next. It's important to understand that while Naftali Bennett is not a Likudnik, the party Likud of Benjamin Netanyahu, there is this political alliance, Yamina, which is an alliance of right-wing parties, including what was originally the New Right, and some other parties, and we will see ultimately how it shakes out in practice now. It is still a right-wing coalition, and it is still, Naftali Bennett is still a right-winger. And it is a real question mark as to what progress, if any, will be able to be made in terms of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Now, on the other side, as I said before, it is a requirement, but it is necessary but not sufficient to remove Benjamin Netanyahu if there is going to be any serious chance at peace talks that could be productive and permanent or semi-permanent, as we may call it. On the other side of that, Hamas, we know, simply cannot be, will not be. They refuse to be. There is no way that Hamas will be a party to any kind of serious peace talks. And Hamas seems potentially as ingrained as ever in Gaza. Hamas if you want to understand sort of the outrageous dynamics of what's going on there, Hamas recently awarded Al Jazeera an award, which Al Jazeera gladly accepted, for their coverage of the recent conflict there. And for anybody who has legitimate criticism of the way that the recent flare-up with Gaza was covered by certain media outlets, but does not have concerns about the coverage of, for example, Al Jazeera, which was recently given an award by Hamas, you're sort of missing half of the picture. So I remain extremely skeptical as to the progress that will be made in the next 2 years, serious progress when it comes to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. But removing Benjamin Netanyahu as prime minister was step 0.1. It was a necessary step. It is not sufficient, and we will now see what happens next. It would be amazing if there were able to be at least some initial hypothetical guidelines set out for some kind of serious path forward. But something that's important to understand is, one of the risks of casually following the internal politics of other countries is no matter who you follow, like whether you're following the New York Times and the Times of Israel, or whether you're following Al Jazeera for your understanding of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, you sometimes miss the forest for the trees. And one of the things that is really important to understand is that within Israel, meaning to Israelis, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict does not actually rank particularly high in terms of the concerns that the Israeli people have for what they want a prime minister or the new prime minister to focus on. It's mostly internal issues. It's internal issues related to economics. It's internal issues related to education and social services and infrastructure, much like in the United States. And it's not different in that sense. And this is something that is really missed when you look at Israel and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict through any kind of Western media, whether it's hard right or whether it's hard left or whether it's centrist. Our lens tends to be foreign policy of Israel and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, much like in the United States, foreign policy. I mean, listen, in the middle of a completely harebrained war with Iraq in 2004, George W. Bush still was reelected. And the war in Iraq, which was like, we went to war with the wrong country over a lie about the connection between Saddam and 9/11. That's insane. And even that only got the war in Iraq to a reasonably important issue for Americans. The primary issues were still domestic, economic, et cetera. It's no different in Israel. And I think that that's a really important detail to understand as anybody from outside of Israel tries to follow and understand what it is that's going on there. So Netanyahu out, that's the good news. Below that, a whole bunch of other details that raise questions that have not yet been answered. Send me your thoughts about what you expect, if anything, to change with the removal of Benjamin Netanyahu. You can find me on Twitter at @Pakman. We will take a break. What a packed show today. It's really a big one. I've been on Fox News a couple of times. If I'm ever invited back, ground news is one of the first things I would use to get my head in the game and prepare myself for the interview, because ground news is a news source comparison platform that lets you compare how outlets from the left, right, and center are reporting on a story. It makes it easy to see the nuances of how sources with differing political biases are covering a story. And it also shows you your news blind spots, stories that your side of the political spectrum may not have covered. Ground News can help you build a well-crafted argument for debating people you disagree with, or Ground News can help you discover something new about your own perspective, challenging your own strongly held views on political issues. Be the most informed person in the room. Download the free Ground News app today by going to ground.news/Pakman. Remember that the David Pakman Show is primarily funded by individual members like you. You can sign up today at joinpakman.com and get instant access to so many great things, including the daily bonus show. You can hear my crazy trip story, sort of, I guess, on the Friday bonus show from last week. I got a ton of responses to it and people found it entertaining and sort of horrifying. But my trip story is on last Friday's bonus show. Sign up at joinpakman.com. Coupon code is available, better21. All right, I have a story today from my birth country of Argentina, and it is unfortunately just like the worst of the stereotypes about Argentinians. One of the stereotypes about Argentinians is that we love to set ourselves apart from the rest of Latin America and say, the rest of Latin America, you know, these are Hispanic people, but we're actually European. Now, it's an exaggeration. It's a stereotype. It's extraordinarily xenophobic and racist, quite frankly. And the current Argentinian president, Alberto Fernandez, did exactly this. During a meeting with the Spanish prime minister, Alberto Fernandez tried to sort of find common ground and to connect with the Spanish prime minister by highlighting, hey, we're European like you guys. And in so doing, he said, you know, the Mexicans are just Indians. The Brazilians came out of the jungle. We came on boats from Europe. We're different. And it is just the worst of the worst. Now, if you've been watching this show for a while, you know that I am not a Fernandez guy. Fernandez is in the line of Cristina Kirchner and her late husband. I'm not a Kirchner guy. Now, I'm also not a Macri guy. I think that basically in Argentina for decades now, the choices have been different types of corruption, different degrees of corruption, none of which serves the people. This is controversial even within my family, where there are people who are big Cristina people who now is the vice president. They just love Cristina, and they're going to write to me because I'm saying this and say I'm wrong about this, I'm wrong about that. It's one of the most disgusting regimes that I've seen, but I'm not a Macri guy. He did some good municipal projects, but it's not like I'm cheering about center-right sort of Trump-style Macri. So in any case, let's get into the video. I'm going to sort of translate, I guess I would say, as we go. There are some English auto-generated subtitles, but I will do my best to kind of let you know what's being said. Check this out.
Me acusan de esto, pero yo la verdad es que siempre lo confieso, no voy a decir una cosa por otra. La América Latina y Argentina puntualmente somos por sobre todas las cosas americolatinistas. Creemos en América Latina y en nuestro continente y en la unidad de nuestro continente. Pero particularmente también soy un europeísta.
So here he's basically saying, listen, Argentina as part of Latin America, we are pro-Latin America, we are Latin American. But me in particular, I'm also a Europeanist, is the word that not a pianist, a Europeanist. Because we consider ourselves part of Europe. Let's continue.
Soy alguien que cree en Europa.
I believe in Europe.
Porque de Europa escribió alguna vez Octavio Paz.
So now he's quoting Octavio Paz, but he clearly likes it. And here's where it gets bad.
Que los mexicanos salieron de los indios, los brasileros salieron de la selva, pero nosotros los argentinos llegamos de los barcos. Y eran barcos que venían de allí.
This is if you were to do a parody and say, what stereotype about Argentinians could we exaggerate to make Argentinians look as bad as possible? This would be the script, which would be, you know, they say the Mexicans came from Indians, natives, Native Americans, Indian, you know, however, whatever phrase is appropriate now to refer to the native peoples. Brazilians came out of the jungle, as if you can imagine a more sort of primitive imagery. But, you know, we Argentinians, we came from boats that came from Europe, which, of course, is coded with racial language. And it's just absolutely nuts. Let's listen to just the end of it.
Europa. Y así construimos nuestra sociedad. Y Europa ha sido, en todo tiempo, ha estado entre los principales inversores reales, no financieros, inversores para el desarrollo de nuestro país.
This is just the worst of just sucking up to the idea of we came from Europe and we developed the country with European investment, and it's just so racialized and so xenophobic and so disgusting. And in a sense, it's not it's not even an attack. It's just this offhanded signal as to how he views Brazilians and Mexicans in comparison to Argentinians. I'm so humiliated by this. This is so embarrassing because among friends who understand the stereotypes about Argentina, sometimes there are jokes made about stuff like this. And, you know, if you go to Argentina and you see there's essentially no what we would consider black folks in Argentina, there's a reason why. It's disgusting. It's horrible, the history of it. You know, there's a lot of historical stuff here that it would be great not to associate with. And then he just sort of like says what for many of them is supposed to be the quiet part completely out loud. I mean, just absolutely humiliating and disgusting. This guy is horrible. It's horrible. And by the way, if you want to see corruption on a scale that would even make Trump blush, okay, look at what's been going on with vaccination in Argentina. Just look it up and see what you think. Conspiracy theorist Alex Jones is now claiming not only that he paid $500,000 to organize the January 6th insurrection in Washington, D.C., but Alex Jones is claiming that he was coordinating it with officials from the Trump White House. Now, bear in mind, Alex Jones lies all the time. He may be lying here, but he may not be. And even if a fraction of this is true, it's a whole new level of insanity related to those riots. Let's check out this clip.
Then the White House told me 3 days before, we're going to have you lead the march. The Secret Service, before Trump finishes 30 minutes before or so, will lead you to a point, take you out of the front row, and lead you to the place where they want you to start the march. And Trump will tell people, go and I'm going to meet you at the Capitol.
If Alex Jones is to be believed, and we'll talk in a moment about whether he is to be believed, he got his marching orders from the Trump White House about the January 6th riots. But understand that if one iota of this is true, the White House helped coordinate the January 6th insurrection with extremist conspiracy theorists. Now, we have some reasons to think there's at least something to this because there are other reports connecting some Trump White House officials to the planning of the insurrection. So, for example, Media Matters previously surfaced some video of Ali Alexander, a so-called Stop the Steal organizer, bragging about having been on the phone with people from the White House and seemed to be encouraging physical violence. That video has since been taken down from YouTube because it apparently violated some guidelines. So there are data points suggesting this well may be true. Now, given what Alex Jones is saying, it's basically a full admission about his involvement, regardless of whether his claims about the Trump White House involvement are true. Is this even going to be investigated? Is Alex Jones being investigated by the FBI for this? I mean, given the number of confessions that are floating around, what seems missing is someone's conviction to take these confessions seriously. So plenty of reason to think that this should at least be looked at as a serious thing, and we can see where the evidence takes us. Now, on the other hand, yeah, Alex Jones is a serial liar. And when he's been put into legal hot water in the past for things he said, his lawyers run in and then they say he's merely an entertainer. He's playing a character on his program. The things he says on his program aren't meant to be taken literally or seriously. He's sort of like a performer. And if that defense sounds familiar, it is the same defense that Fox News' lawyers used when Tucker Carlson got into legal trouble, saying, you know, Tucker engages in hyperbole. It's not news reporting. What he says should not be taken literally. It's a stunningly common defense of so many people that millions of Americans are actually getting what they believe to be news from, that see what comes out of their mouths as facts, or at least ostensibly facts. This is definitely a defense you will not hear me use. Okay, I can promise to you today, what I say on this show is not hyperbolic or performative in the sense that it's not what I really believe. I might use hyperbolic language sometimes. It may occasionally be inaccurate. Sometimes I get a fact wrong and I will make every effort to correct it. My opinion may change over time, but I don't pretend to be me. I am not playing a character on this program. This is not a defense you will ever hear from me. Now, it would be great for Alex Jones to provide some records. And what I mean by that is, if he was really coordinating things with the White House, unless the belief is that these were all in-person meetings, did he have phone calls with people from the White House? Then show us the phone records. Are there text messages? Are there emails? There should be some trail that would help to show us if that Alex Jones is telling the truth, if he is. And of course, we could really use a more credible witness than Alex Jones. But if he has the goods, this would be a good time to present them to us. What do you think? You think Alex Jones is telling the truth? You think he's lying? You think he's simply exaggerating? Let us know. We'll have more coverage of this on the David Pakman Show Instagram, which you can find at David Pakman Show. And follow me while you're there at david.pakman. Quick break, right back after this. Don't forget that the best way to support the David Pakman Show is by becoming a member, which gives you access to the daily bonus show, the regular show with no commercials. You also get access to our entire archive of every episode dating back a really long time, and plenty of other awesome membership perks. Go to joinpakman.com and use the coupon code BETTER21 for a huge discount. Joinpakman.com. So against my better judgment, I decided over this past weekend to do live coverage of the Mike Lindell MyPillow Frank speech rally in Wisconsin. And I always love being with you guys, love sharing events with the live audience. But this one was really, really tough to watch. It was truly an historic event organized by Mike Lindell, a big Trump supporter, founder and CEO of the MyPillow brand. It was a 4-hour event. I was only able to get through about 2.5 hours before I just had to bail. The lineup at this event included Mike Lindell himself, Diamond and Silk, Charlie Kirk, Brannon Howes, Chris Cox, Dinesh D'Souza, Danielle D'Souza, Sheriff Clark, and of course, Donald Trump himself joining the event via video conference. Now, 99% of what happened at this event was merely the disgusting nonsense you would expect. The event had a scheduled flyover. It failed. I guess the planes didn't show up. It was really weird. But it was really capped off by Donald Trump delivering a deranged and bizarre speech during which his eyes appeared almost completely swollen shut. We've seen this with Trump a couple of times before. He was also slurring and seemed to be engaged in a real battle against his own tongue, which was determined apparently to prevent him from being able to enunciate anything clearly. And this rally, while disgusting and depraved, it really confirmed our suspicions. They seem fully intent on riding this horse into the 2022 election. That's the Trump horse. And they will see how far it gets them. Trump launching right into his entire "I actually won the election" thing. The talking points have been the same for 6 months. And Trump just labored, struggling to speak. Take a look.
We went from 63 million votes and we won to 75 million people, and they say we lost, but we didn't lose. 75 million votes, they say that we lost. Now, I was told by John McLaughlin, who's considered just about the best pollster, I would say the best pollster. There's a few of them out there, Towery. There are a few of them out there that are great. Sir, you got 63 million. If you can go up to 65, you can't lose the election. Well, you know what happened? We went up to 75, and they say we lost the election. If you win Miami, if you win Florida, if you take out and win, and we won by a lot, Florida and Ohio, and then you add Iowa, nobody's ever won those states and lost. But we won those states in virtual landslides, and they have us losing. And there are so many. We held every state house. We held Congress,
It's all so labored. And of course, it's the same lies week after week. As you can hear, the crowd is not exactly riveted by what Donald Trump is saying. Here is Donald Trump delivering a defense of, I guess, Rudy Giuliani, but it's hard to tell if he really means it, but just not looking good, not sounding good.
I want to thank people like Rudy Giuliani, who is out there fighting, and they're after him, and they want to take him down. They want to take us all down. There's never been a time like this. There's never been. It's weaponized. It's weaponized. And the Republicans were very nice. Our people were very, very nice and very, very respectful. And I said this would happen. But Rudy is a great patriot. He was the greatest mayor in the history of New York and a great, great patriot. And what he's done and what Mike has done and what so many other people have done, these are incredible heroes. And they're going to go down as heroes someday. And I think it's someday in the not too distant future. So I look forward to being with you.
Hopefully they go down, but not as heroes. Hopefully they just go down for their crimes and misdeeds. Then here is Trump really just fighting that tongue to enunciate coherently, saying China should pay the world for the virus. But kind of weird. Yeah, take a look.
And the China virus, they have to pay reparations. We've been hurt so badly in terms of death, human life, and in terms of monetarily to a level that they have to pay us. And frankly, if they paid us $10 trillion, that wouldn't cover it. But they really have to pay the world because this has started in the world. The entire world has been not only disrupted.
And just the slurring, the eyes almost completely shut during this next segment. And then the video froze, which in a sense was like the best moment of the rant when the video froze.
Having a hard time with the contractors. I know contractors better than anyone. They're very brilliant. They may not read or write in some cases, but you know what? They're smarter than the rest. They're smarter. So I just want to thank everybody.
The video freezing seemed to get the crowd more interested than anything Trump had said up until that point. At another moment, Donald Trump falsely claimed to have stopped the Russian oil pipeline. Like it just didn't happen. It's just factually untrue.
I stopped the Russia pipeline, probably the biggest pipeline in the world, going into Germany and other countries in Europe. It was stopped.
Never happened. Just it didn't happen. It's not true. A few other really strange moments. Here are Diamond and Silk apparently explaining something about the so-called audit in Arizona of the absentee ballots. See if you can understand this.
Question for you.
Okay, what is it?
I notice how the Democrats is trying to interfere in the certification of the audit.
Wonder
And
why?
I remember them saying that it's an insurrection when you try to block the certification. So my question is, if they're trying to interfere in the audits in Arizona, for example, does that make them an insurrection because they're trying to stop the verification of the certification of Jim Crow Joe?
Good way of looking at it.
I don't know, guys. That's pretty strong. I'm pretty convinced. I don't know of what, but I'm pretty convinced by that. Another favorite moment was when Mike Lindell claimed that I guess a friend of his he was banned from Google Maps. Really weird.
A friend of mine about a month ago, I was on his radio show and they he sent it out, the podcast part, to all his, he emailed it out, 30,000 emails. Google took away his Gmails and his Google Maps. I want you to think about that. They took away his Google Maps.
I feel like I need an interpreter to even understand what it is they are claiming. Like I'm having trouble even adjudicating the claims that are being made by these people because I don't even know what the claims are. And then lastly, maybe the funniest moment, this is a crowd heading for the exits while Mike Lindell is speaking. Apparently the crowd had had enough.
We're in the greatest revival for Jesus in the history of the world. But I want to tell you all, so I'm going to tell you what I want to do is I want to bring it back as how did I end up here? How did we end up here today? Especially when here's an ex-crack addict from Minnesota. So I'm going to tell you a little, I'll bring you back in time, you know.
So if you're listening today and not watching, the crowd was just heading out while Mike Lindell was speaking. One of my favorite segments from the Trump era is a segment where Trump went to India and this big stadium full of people started heading towards the exits as Donald Trump was speaking and mispronouncing all sorts of Indian names. This was the equivalent. This was the equivalent during the Mike Lindell rally. So another completely humiliating event, but signaling a few things to us. Number one, the Trump crowd doesn't seem to be that worried about sunburn. And the reason I say that is this was a 4-hour event, which opened 2 hours early, and people just sitting in the blazing hot sun the entire time. I hope they brought sunscreen, but they don't seem super concerned about sun exposure. That's one thing we learned. And number two, they really seem to be on this. They're not changing horses midstream, I think would be the metaphor that we would apply to this. They seem committed to at least seeing what Trumpianism is going to bring them through 2022. If it fails, then maybe they'll go a different direction. But yet another complete and total embarrassment, not to be outdone by Marjorie Taylor Greene, although she's trying. Let's talk about that next. QAnon-friendly, radical, Trumpian, Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene said she doesn't believe in evolution during a bonkers off-the-wall interview with Steve Bannon on his so-called War Room program. Now, I want to be really clear here. If you want to simply see this as it's just another nutty thing Marjorie Taylor Greene said, and leave it at that, you can do that. But understand that the world sees what I am about to play for you, and the world is shocked. The civilized world anyway. How does the United States still have people in the House and Senate? Forget about people who deny climate change. That ship has sailed. But we still have people in the House and Senate who deny evolution. And I want to get into a little bit later the terminology of don't believe in evolution. We're going to get to that because that's a problem too. The context was apparently COVID-19 and the lab leak theory, and it caused Marjorie Taylor Greene to casually drop in that she doesn't believe in evolution. Okay, let's listen.
Hang on. You don't buy the argument that say, hey, the gain of function is all because we got to take these viruses and we got to power them up to look for vaccines and to look for other solutions in case somehow they come up with this. You don't buy the logic of that. Is that what you're saying?
No, I don't buy it because I don't believe in evolution. I don't believe in that type of so-called science. I don't believe in evolution. I believe in God. And there's these viruses were not making people sick until they created them and made them into weaponize these viruses to be able to attach to our cells and make us sick. This has caused so many people to die all over the world. This is a bioweapon.
All right. So the terminology, she doesn't believe in evolution, so the virus couldn't have evolved, but she believes in God, but then says the virus was created by them, meaning China. But how could China create anything if everything is God's creation? That's crazy, incoherent. I don't even want to focus on that today. That's crazy, but I don't want to focus on that. This is an outrageous rant, and it's an ignorant screed. But understand that this is a member of the United States Congress, voted in by her constituents in the state of Georgia. When I first saw this story, I scrolled by and I thought it said, oh, Marjorie Taylor Greene says she doesn't believe in education. That's not actually the headline, but it might as well be. So let's talk about belief in evolution. I hate it when people say this. Maybe it's you don't accept evolution. It might more accurately be you don't understand evolution, but don't believe in evolution makes it seem as though it's an issue of faith. Imagine if someone didn't believe in gravity. We'd say, well, what difference does it make? You have no choice but to accept it and to exist in a physical world in which gravity is a reality. You might not understand it, but to not believe in gravity sounds as idiotic as you imagine it to be. And so when people say, I don't believe in evolution, it should really be thought of in the exact same way. It should sound just as strange to us. She doesn't understand it. She apparently wants to keep other people from understanding it. But the main point here is, if I said, I don't believe the sun is the source of heat on the surface of the earth. I might not accept it. I might not understand it. But the reason I can go outside and it's a temperature that is suitable for human life is that it is the reality. It doesn't matter whether I understand it or accept it or believe in it. It's really dumb to say, I don't believe the sun heats up the earth. And it's really dumb to say, I don't believe in evolution. People who say it should be seen the same way as people who say, I don't believe in gravity. I don't believe the sun heats the earth. These views should be ostracized and they should be called out. But the most important part is this should disqualify you from being an elected official. If you don't accept or understand or believe in, to use their term, something this uncontroversial, how can you be trusted to do anything about any issue ever? Now, one funny thing, if anything were to make me question evolution, it would sort of be Marjorie Taylor Greene. What I mean by that is life has evolved for millions and millions of years. We come out of the ocean and down from the trees and we develop medicine and science and Netflix and technology and air travel. And yet somehow Marjorie Taylor Greene still exists. I'm kidding. But I'm also sort of not, if you understand what I'm saying. Horrifying that this is what we have. We have 435 members of Congress, and she doesn't understand or accept evolution. To use her word, she doesn't believe in it. It's a global humiliation, my friends, and it must be changed. If you value what we do at the David Pakman Show, remember to support us on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/David Pakman Show, where you can get access to behind the scenes videos, the daily bonus show, the commercial free daily show, as well as special discounts on merch, including hats, hoodies, mugs, and t-shirts. You can support the show for as little as $2 a month. Check it out at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. You know, I really was feeling like we had kind of seen it all recently related to strange comparisons to the Holocaust or references to Jews or thinly veiled anti-Semitism. We heard about Marjorie Taylor Greene's so-called Jewish space lasers, Marjorie Taylor Greene saying wearing a mask on the House floor is like the Holocaust, or mandatory vaccinations, which don't exist, are like the Holocaust. But a woman claiming to be a registered nurse, she may be a registered nurse. I just mean, I don't know that to be true. She says she's a registered nurse. It's scary if a registered nurse would believe what I'm about to play for you. But a woman claiming to be a registered nurse appeared on CNN yesterday and claimed specifically that COVID vaccination and the medical trial process for developing new drugs is like Nazi medical experiments of the World War II era. She says it's not exactly like it, but it's sort of like it. You simply have to see this to believe it. This is a completely disgusting woman. Let's get right into it.
We're not going to say this is nearly as big as the Holocaust was, but
it's not nearly as big as the Holocaust was, but. And then here we go.
At the beginning, the way they did make people have trials and injections, medications, procedures against their will. This is pretty much what they're doing right now.
What? Who's having procedures against their will? Who's taking medications against their will? Who's being forced to do anything? Do you remember what was, we'll get to Nazi medical experiments.
They're forcing people to take a shot when they don't want to. And
nobody is being forced to take a shot. Nobody is being forced to take a shot. If you want to travel to some countries, you can decide, I will do the things that are required to go to that country. If you want to sit in the vaccinated section that will be full rather than only 1/3 full at certain stadiums, then you can choose to go and get yourself vaccinated. Nobody is being forced to take a shot.
They're not giving the proper informed consent. Like, nobody is being told the risk factors before getting this injection.
That is completely untrue. When I went and I got my very, very powerful Moderna vaccine, I was screened with like an 8-question initial screening. I was then given like a 2-page document about it. Then the person giving me the shot asked me a bunch of questions. Then I was told to stay in observation for 15 minutes. And for my second shot, all of the same stuff happened. All of it is nothing this woman is saying is true. It's hard. It's actually hard to keep up with all the things she's saying that aren't true.
Okay, I just want to be clear, though. I mean, you do realize that there is no comparison here to the Holocaust, right? I mean, the Nazi doctors held medical experiments on people, and some died. It was painful. It was awful.
Right.
How could you even...
Yeah, but somebody's arm hurt from the vaccine.
Compare it to that?
I didn't compare it to the Holocaust, but I did compare it to the beginnings of it, which is the Nuremberg trials.
Oh, it was like the beginning of the Holocaust, the Nuremberg trials. The Nuremberg trials were at the end. They took place between, I would guess, 45 and 46. And, maybe she means Nuremberg laws, but the Nuremberg, she doesn't know anything, guys, is the point. Now, to really put a fine point on how disgusting this is. And these people, getting vaccinated against something that has killed millions of people is nothing like the experiments conducted by German doctors during the World War II. First of all, the conditions were inhumane. There was complete lack of consent. The research standards were questionable at best. And look at the things that were actually done during World War II. Prisoners were frozen to try to find treatments for hypothermia, exposed to extreme cold. Prisoners were used to test methods of making seawater drinkable. People were drinking salt water, forced to drink salt water. Prisoners were exposed to phosgene and mustard gases in order to test antidotes. A whole bunch of different sterilization type experiments were done, especially at Auschwitz and Ravensbrück. Scientists tested ways of doing mass sterilization on Jews. Nobody was held hostage and forced to get vaccinated here. People who wanted to participate in the vaccine trials chose to participate in the vaccine trials. They were told the risks. Jews didn't have that opportunity. The culture of conspiracism, but also historical ignorance. She doesn't even know enough about the Holocaust to realize what she's saying is to realize the degree to which what she's saying is absurd. And she almost seems proud of it, defiantly making these claims. Well, it's sort of like some aspects of the Holocaust, like the Nuremberg trials at the beginning of the Holocaust. What? And I hope that whoever her employer is, if she is a registered nurse, sees this video and then decides, like employers are able to do, thanks to Republicans saying employers should be able to do whatever they want. Hopefully her employer will then decide this is someone that should be working for us, or this is someone that we should be parting ways with. Over the weekend, apparently what Fox News host Judge Jeanine Pirro believed we needed more of was another xenophobic anti-immigrant rant on her program. And so she really did a number on her Saturday night episode. Here is Jeanine saying she doesn't give a damn about why undocumented immigrants are coming here, that their reasoning for coming here is merely a distraction.
Time after the pandemic. And I don't give a damn what the reason is for their coming here, and neither should you. It's nothing but a ruse to prevent you from answering the harder question.
Now, of course, this completely does away with our ability to say, somebody who was under 18 and was brought here by their parents and has committed no crime is very different than someone who came over as an adult and maybe did commit some kind of violent crime. That eliminates the fact that we are reasonable people who can look at circumstances and say, actually, it really does matter what the circumstances of people getting here were. Then the big surprise of the show is Judge Jeanine trots out Donald Trump's daughter-in-law, Lara Trump, who says, hey, you know what? You people at the border, because, Biden's not doing a damn thing about it. You need to get yourselves some guns and take matters into your own hands. What? Here is the idea.
Disgraceful to see. And I don't know what you tell the people that live at the southern border. I guess they better arm up and get guns and be ready. And maybe they're going to have to start taking matters into their own hands. It should never happen. These people should never make this dangerous journey here.
That's an idea, right? I mean, if the NRA did product placement, it would be, let's get prominent right-wingers loved by the Fox News audience to go on to Fox shows and talk about how people should buy guns. Like this is, the NRA couldn't buy advertising this good for their clients who are the gun manufacturers. We have a country plagued by mass shooting after mass shooting after mass shooting. Last week, I reported to you, we had 10 mass shootings the previous weekend. Most of them didn't even make major news stories. Once again, this past weekend, I don't even have data for yesterday yet, but when I looked, on Friday, we had another 4 mass shootings in the United States, a total of 4 killed and 17 injured at the 4 Friday shootings. Then we go to Saturday in the United States. We had another 4 mass shootings, 4 killed, 31 injured. Really, the only one of any of these that made significant news was the one in Austin, Texas, where 14 people were injured as of the last time I checked. Fortunately, nobody was killed. Every day, 3 to 5 mass shootings in the United States. Endless smaller shootings where maybe only 1 or 2 people are injured or killed. And Lara Trump shows up and says, hey, go and get guns and be ready to use them and take things into your own hands when it comes to migrants at the border who they may be undocumented, they may not be, as if it really even makes a difference when it comes to suggesting people become some kind of vigilante force. This is the exact statement that, made in a different context, made by somebody else, might be investigated as a possible crime in many situations. A good rule of thumb to live by. Here's a little like life advice for people who are seeking it. And apparently many people are. If you have a situation you're analyzing, whatever it might be, and you start to think, you know what might be a good solution here? Introduce more guns into the situation. Stop and really evaluate whether that makes sense. Because in 99.99% of situations where there's a problem, introducing more guns is not the solution. Almost without fail, introducing more guns is likely to give you a worse outcome than a better one. So this is very dangerous, sickening rhetoric. It is exhausting to deal with, and it's kind of like a game of whack-a-mole. Trump's out of office, but now Lara Trump is regularly appearing on TV and saying the absolute worst reactionary instincts in every situation, no matter the issue. I got an email from someone saying, you know, David, that what she did is really a crime. If you look at 18 U.S. Code subsection 373, solicitation to commit a crime of violence, you're not going to get her on that, because if pressed, there's enough ambiguity where she would say, no, I just meant people should have guns in case, you know, undocumented immigrants trespass on your property or they try to physically attack you or your children or whatever the case. You're not going to get her on that. I understand, but you're not going to get her on that. It's almost as if like they plan their crimes openly and then they end up not being held accountable. And mostly that has worked for Trump. And this is not merely theoretical. Remember back in I believe this was in 2019, we had that El Paso shooting where the suspect said he was targeting Mexicans. This rhetoric has a real impact. It's not trivial. It's not merely hypothetical. It's not merely an academic question. This is rhetoric that gets people to commit violent acts in real life. It's horrible. It's disgusting. And sadly, there's every indication it's going to continue. We have a voicemail number. You can call the voicemail number really whenever you want. And many people call at times of day that are times I tend to be sleeping, but that's okay because you can call any time of day. Here is a caller. It is the Eggman. The Eggman has really been on an anti-mask tear lately, and I guess he's blaming me for his daughter wearing a mask. Listen to this.
Hi, Dave. So I'm headed out on Saturday afternoon with my 15-year-old daughter, and she says, oh, darn it, Dad, I forgot my mask. And I tell her, kid, you don't need one. You're double vaccinated. We're all good to go. And she says, well, you know I know I don't need one, but I just don't want people to look at me like, I'm like, my kid now, Dave, has that attitude because you and so many people keep perpetuating the wear masks even if you're vaccinated idea. Dave, we got to stop this. You know that it's virtue signaling.
I admit that it's virtue signaling. I know, but why is Eggman blaming me?
You know it. Let's move past this. I want to see somebody without a mask and not know if they're an anti-vaxxer or vaccinated. I don't want to judge them by that anymore. You don't need to wear them anymore. That's what the CDC says. So, I don't know. Let's not worry about hurting other people's feelings. Shalom, brother. my kid's listening to this, and now I'm going to get judged.
Yeah. Well, listen, the Eggman should be judged. And I don't know what is going on from the standpoint of parenting over there. But listen, I've said, it's almost like Groundhog's Day here, where I keep saying the same thing. We've been following the CDC guidelines all along. And so why would we now all of a sudden stop following CDC guidelines? What I have admitted is merely for issues of I'm making a social decision where if I stick my head into a grocery store, as I did yesterday, and everybody's still wearing a mask, I just put the mask on partially because I get recognized at the grocery store all the time. And I don't think it would be a great thing for me professionally if I am photographed or seen as being the only unvaccinated people in the grocery store. So it's total virtue signaling. I agree with that. But I think what the Eggman's daughter has learned, and this is actually a great lesson, is that we can understand the science. We can understand the CDC guidelines. We can feel safe not wearing a mask if we are vaccinated. But for social reasons, we might say, here's something I'm going to do just to make it easier on me. Some people don't care if everybody's staring at them because they're the one person not wearing the mask. And that's one personality type. But the Eggman's daughter seems to have a sense of self where she says, I'd rather feel safe either way, but just throw the mask on, even though I don't need it, just so I don't attract attention to myself that I may not want. That's a perfectly reasonable calculation to make in society. As I said before, I never thought I needed a mask to just be out by myself on my bike on the bike path. But at the point at which everybody was doing it, I just did it. And it just made things easier for me. And there's value in that as well. All right, Eggman, Little Egg, everybody, I hope you're doing well. Shalom. We have a great bonus show for you today. Jeffrey Toobin, after being caught exposing himself during a Zoom meeting, is back, and he's apparently been promoted on CNN. It's wild what's going on. North Carolina has decided to end that really stupid Coca-Cola ban. You probably forgot about it, but remember when there was a boycott of Coke in North Carolina because I don't even remember what the controversy was. What did Coke do? They supported voting rights, I guess it was, or I don't even remember. We'll talk about it. And Apple iPhones will soon be able to hold your ID. Privacy experts are on edge. We will talk about those stories and more on today's bonus show. Get instant access by becoming a member at joinpakman.com. Thanks a lot for watching today's show. I just want to take a second to tell you about today's sponsors. Ground News is combating divisiveness in media. Ground is a news comparison platform that helps you see multiple perspectives for any news story so you can be more of a well-rounded news reader. Download the free app at ground.news/Pakman.